Hi again, everybody. This video is sponsored by contribution from Elle, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. The stories I hear on your channel bring up so many memories. A recent one about a terrible stepmother, Kathy, hit really close to home. When you read our stories, not only can we relate and commiserate, but it's so freeing to get it out. Our secrets make us sick because of shame or embarrassment, and we don't have a safe place to share our experiences. Thanks for giving us this place. Plus, you crack me up, and laughter is the best medicine. Once upon a time, I had a scandalous, out of wedlock baby when I was 34. I was divorced since age 22 and had two daughters, ages 14 and 13, who were living with their father at the time. Another story we already covered in a previous video. When my boyfriend, we'll call him Darren, the father, were living with their father at the time. Oh, wait a minute. The father and I went through the pregnancy. He wanted to get married. I suggested we give it a year to get his act together. He was only 29, but behaved like a teenager. Don't get me wrong, he was a lot of fun, but when it was time to grow up, he balked at the responsibility of getting full-time work. I went back to work and decided not to marry him. Meanwhile, we knew a woman named Kathy who shared a mutual friend of mine. And I ran into her at social events. I didn't give her much thought. She was kind of a hillbilly, and her son, who was about two or three, was the worst behaved toddler I ever met. He was a monster. Whenever I would run into Kathy, she always mentioned how hot Darren was, and I thought that was pretty weird. When Darren and I broke up, Kathy pounced. She had been waiting in the wings for this to happen since she knew through the grapevine of mutual friends that we were having problems. Darren didn't have a place to live except back at his mom's. I asked him to move out of my place and moved 50 miles west to be closer to my older daughters. He would take the baby on weekends and eventually moved into Kathy's house with the toddler terror. She proceeded within a year to get pregnant, to one-up me or to secure her status with him. She had a baby boy and they bought a house together. They didn't get married because she was on disability and would lose her income. In fact, they never got married, so even though she wasn't legally a stepmother, she played that part in my daughter's life. Kathy talked Darren into going to court for formal visitation and to set up child support. Up to that point, since we had never been married, we could make the arrangements ourselves without involving the horrible juvenile court system, which had jurisdiction over this since domestic relations was reserved for married couples. I thought that it was a bad idea. Let's just keep this between us. Nope. Kathy wanted to make sure I wasn't getting too much child support. I was getting about $50 a week at that point and wanted to make sure that they could have my daughter for weekends and weeks during the summer. My daughter was only 2 at the time, so I thought that was a lot. Anyway, we went to court. I had to get a lawyer. When they crunched the numbers and did the math, it turned out he had to pay me $600 a month in child support because then he had gotten a really good job. He also got the typical alternate weekends and 6 weeks in the summer, which we had divided into 2 weeks per month instead of a block of 6 weeks, which is too long for a child to be away from home. This wasn't my idea, and I don't make the rules. I warned him not to go to court, but no. She thought she was getting something over on me, and when she saw what he would have to pay me, she went ballistic. She stood up and yelled at the judge, saying I had no proof of needing that much money. The judge had her removed from the courtroom. It was pretty funny. I think that's when her evil little mind decided to try and take my daughter from me, since it was worth about $1,000 a month to them, saving the $600 in support Darren had to pay me, plus the $400 or $500 I'd have to pay him if he got custody. Thus began her 10-year mission to punish me, my daughter, Darren, and attempt to create a case where she and Darren could get custodial status. When my daughter would visit, she would put her to work around the house like Cinderella. She accused her of trying to poison her younger son, Darren Jr. with berries off a bush. She accused my daughter of stealing a Game Boy game and subjected her to strip searches and searching her suitcase before she left from a visit. She never washed her clothes, and my daughter would come home with a suitcase full of dirty laundry. She went shopping and bought her son's toys and games and didn't buy anything for my daughter. She told my daughter that I loved my other children more than her and that I wanted her to live with her dad. She threatened to hook my daughter up to a lie detector to show she was lying about stealing. I told my daughter that's ridiculous. Darren was always at work or drunk or hunting, so when my daughter was over there for weeks in the summer, she hardly saw him. One time I went to pick my daughter up from a visit. She was about 4, since her dad was 2 days late bringing her home. Kathy refused to let me have her. She slammed the door on my head. I threw a backhand slap at her and knocked her glasses off, and she called the cops. I waited for the cops to come, sitting in my car in a blizzard. They didn't show up for a half hour, so I went home without my daughter. When I got home, the police called me and said she filed a complaint of assault and trespassing. I had to go to court again. And when I told the judge what happened, he placed a restraining order on Kathy and said that Darren would have to drop off and pick up my daughter from a neutral location from then on. I still had to pay a fine for disorderly conduct. He was ticked off that she had made this so inconvenient for him. Kathy's terrible child grew up and at age 8 or 9 attempted some very inappropriate sexual acts with my daughter. I'm not sure how innocent it was since he was pretty young, but I know he was exposed to pornography and may have gotten ideas from that, or perhaps he was subjected to it himself. I don't know. All I know is when I found out, I told Darren I wasn't going to let her visit until that kid got some counseling. They put the boy in counseling and promised it would never happen again. Kathy blamed my daughter, of course, and threatened to send her to a juvenile home for lying about her son. Carried out this terror on my daughter for a decade. Whenever I would complain to Darren about it, he'd say I was jealous of her, that my daughter was making it all up. This infuriated me, but there wasn't much I could do without proof of abuse. Speaking of abuse, Kathy called CPS on me and complained that my daughter and her brother, who was 2 or 3 years old, were bathing together and sleeping in the same room. She made it sound like they were having an incestuous relationship. They were preschoolers. It was funny to see the caseworker's face when she came over to inspect my house and talk to my daughter. She asked, "How old is your son?" I said, 3. She shook her head and left. Kathy told my daughter she smelled like butt crack and that I made her eat plaster and wallpaper instead of food. It was totally insane. She called CPS on me 5 times over the course of 5 years. My daughter came home one day and told me that Kathy had offered to buy her a pony if she agreed to live with them instead of me. A pony. Awesome. In 2005, Kathy started a website where she wrote articles about what a terrible mother I was, how horrible my daughter was, and the sexual abuse charges she said were all false against her son, and a whole litany of dirty laundry, libel, and horror that I tried to get her to remove for my daughter's sake. She was trying to hurt my business in case people Googled me, they might find her site. I tried getting Google to get rid of it. I tried having Darren insist it being removed. I consulted with a lawyer about libel and slander to see if I had any rights. The site stayed up there, even though probably nobody important ever saw it. The last summer my daughter stayed a week was 2008. She was 12. I went to pick her up from Darren's house since he promised he would be there. I was doing him a favor by not insisting we meet at the McDonald's. I arrived an hour early because I came directly from work, and Kathy, once again, wouldn't let me take my daughter home. My daughter had a meltdown and ran to my car. I refused to engage since I didn't want to get involved with the police again. I knew she was trying to bait me. Kathy grabbed my daughter by the arm and forcefully took her back into the house. I had to get out of the car, walk towards my daughter, who was screaming from the window, and Kathy, who weighed about 250 pounds, started lumbering toward me with a threatening glare. I said, I'm not going to get into it with you. I'm taping this on my tape recorder in the car. So whatever you do, I'll have it on tape. She got in my face as I stepped back. I fell on a tree stump. I got up, brushed off, walked to the car. I left. My daughter was still crying. I called her dad and said, you can bring her home. I'm not coming back. Your girlfriend is a psycho bitch. I will have nothing more to do with this. He had me meet my daughter 25 miles away about an hour later. I don't understand. See, I have a line. Like, if somebody were to lay their hands on my daughter, I don't think I would be able to control myself. Your mistake was not waiting for the police. You should have just called the police. You should have just called the police. A few months went by, and in October, my daughter found Kathy's website. She freaked out. She called her dad and told him that unless she got her to remove all references of her, she was never coming back. Kathy got on the phone and tried to gaslight my daughter by saying everything she was saying wasn't true, that she remembered it wrong, that there was nothing on the site about her. My daughter wasn't having any of that. She started screaming at Kathy, and I had to go upstairs and hang up the phone and calm her down. She practically hyperventilated. When her dad came to pick her up the following weekend, my daughter refused to go. At first he said okay and didn't try to force her. The next time he came, she wasn't home, and I told her I couldn't make her visit. If he wanted to go to court over it, he could, but then the cat was out of the bag, and he might lose visitation with her, based on Kathy's abuse and the history of her son's abuse. By the third or fourth time, he gave up. She never went back. She went from age 12 to 18 without a single visit. Saw her grandmother and aunts at holidays and such, but never the night at her dad's again. She refuses to see Kathy ever. She's doing very well and has overcome the worst of it. She has a lot of time to heal. My daughter is in college now, and she stayed no contact with Kathy. She had some heart-to-heart talks with her father over the years about what happened, and he did express some remorse, but he's still with Kathy. He claims he's staying with her until his son graduates from high school. Ollie, I blame him. What do you think? What kind of guy would let his girlfriend treat his daughter that way? What kind of weak-ass weasel is he? Looking forward to your comments, as always, L. Well, you have it exactly right. He is the problem. And your daughter would have every right to tell him at this point, as long as you're with that woman, I will have nothing to do with you. Kathy doesn't do these behaviors when he's around, or she might do them, but it gets far worse when he's not around. So how does him staying there with the son, okay, if he's staying with Kathy because of the son, but he goes off to work and the son's still alone with Kathy, what's the point? What's the point? Meanwhile, he's still paying you the child support. Kathy's still stewing on that. If he really wanted to help his children, he would have got them away from Kathy a long, long time ago. Not only his daughter, but his son that he had with her. But he has no balls. He has no balls, and he's willing to sacrifice his own children for a piece of ass. And that's exactly what he's doing. Because he's not even married to her. He's not even married to her. So obviously the connection can't be that deep if they never actually got married. I mean, you were smart enough not to marry him as well, so you must have saw something. This all lies on his behalf. The assault, all of that. Because he could have insisted that she drop those assault charges. Say, no. Who are you to prevent her from picking up the daughter? Our daughter. A daughter that isn't your child, is mine and her child. And that's really where it is. He could have stopped. He should have put his foot down several times in this relationship. When the kid turned out to be a child molester, I think you let him off the hook. You let him off the hook by saying the kid needs therapy. My daughter ain't coming there until he goes away for therapy. Forget that. So yeah, you have it exactly right. He's the key to all of this, his weakness and, his need or his decision to put the narcissist over the safety of his own children is what he's done. So your daughter's right to stay no con to hold him to it. And if I were her, I would have zero contact with him whatsoever. But that's a decision for her to make. So thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any advice or opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover or a narcissist you'd like to expose, you know what to do with my email and the PayPal link in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon. Bye.